Good evening, everyone, and this is Late Night Gaming Thought. I actually remembered who we are this time, which is improvement from our first run-through. Sitting on the table, we have several sets of keys, 3 laptops, some recording equipment, a bottle of Gatorade, a bottle of Mountain Dew, some angel hair pasta, a plastic cup, and 4 broken dreams. So tonight's topic, guys, is going to be the rise of retro-style games and why they're so popular. And with games like To the Moon, Binding of Isaac, you could even make an argument for Minecraft. Dive Kick would be another good example.
Shovel Knight.
Yeah.
Super Meat Boy.
Hotline Miami. And all sorts of games like this, and why they're popular. So, without any further ado, I suppose let's start talking about it.
First, let's introduce ourselves again. I'm Tito and/or Joe here.
Brian here.
And Nordy J. We're definitely going to bleep out Tito's real name because that was silly.
How silly.
Oh, God. This is going to go so well.
Anyway.
We're recording at 1:30 at night for those of you who don't know, which should be everybody, but it will become vastly and rapidly apparent.
Absolutely. Okay, so rise of retro gaming. I think what we should first talk about is some of the theories behind it, because I find it perplexing the fact that this is not good looking, arguably.
Well, I think even then we need to start with defining by what we mean by retro gaming.
Okay. That's a better start.
Do you mean, when you say not good looking, you mean graphically, or?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we resort back to, 16 or 8-bit games.
Look at Minecraft and Hotline Miami. Nobody's going to make an argument that those are visually impressive games.
I would
They're artistic.
disagree heavily,
And Hotline
actually.
Miami is really great artistic style.
Hotline
Well, yeah.
Miami is one of the most beautiful games of the last 2
Soundtrack's
years, I'd
amazing
argue.
also.
And
Okay, let me rephrase that then. Artistically complex. Like it doesn't rely on graphics as heavily as something like the newest Assassin's Creed
or
coming
Skyrim.
out. Or Skyrim. It's not relying on that. Like
I know you listeners can't see this, but I just made an awful face when Joe mentioned Skyrim as a case of great graphics. Moving on.
It's beautiful.
With the right mods.
Exactly.
Anyway, I think the issue we're gonna run across is that we're gonna try and define, these retro games as things that use pixelated graphics. That's what people are generally referring to.
Mm-hmm.
But just in the intro, you brought up Binding of Isaac. Definitely not something that uses pixelated graphics.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd still consider it kind of a retro, faux retro game, and for good reason. It's kind of, people tend to call it a roguelike, but I don't think it's quite, but it's kind of a classic dungeon crawlery type of thing.
Yeah.
You can feel like the first and few Legend of Zeldas in there, in a creepy kind of sense.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm gonna put forth that I don't think we should limit the kind of retroness we're discussing to the graphics, because I think it goes a lot deeper than most people realize. A lot of people are talking about, all these indie developers on Steam just making these faux retro games. But I think it's actually at least beginning to be felt even in, the AAA gaming companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was gonna bring up eventually, and I think this is a good time, like the gameplay of the newest Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds, which is the same kind of gameplay that they used in the SNES Legend of Zelda.
Link to the Past.
Link to the Past. It's the same gameplay. It's just, Link is now a 3D, walking thing, as opposed to the 2D walking around Link in Link to the Past. It's the same gameplay. It's the same gameplay. It's the dungeons. I bet the dungeons are easier because Nintendo doesn't like to make things hard anymore. But I mean, it's the same gameplay, and I think that's really what Brian was trying to get at. And yeah, it should be something that is worth something in this retro argument.
I feel like one reason why it's becoming more prominent is because as people and granted my ignorance on the topic should be noted, but I feel like game developing companies and people of that matter it always comes down to one thing. Not only not only about creating a great game, but the money that goes into making it, and it shows the fact that you can create an amazing game with not as much production value as let's say a Skyrim, which that took I bet you a lot of people, a lot of resources, long time. When you compare it to a small team who don't have to use a designed engine necessarily, that's gonna cost big bucks and stuff like that. They can also for instance, To the Moon, definitely not really the greatest gameplay. It really tells an amazing story, and it does that by using RPG Maker. Just an example like that, you don't have to shell out the big bucks to make something beautiful.
Well, I think the soundtrack did a very good job of complementing that.
Exactly.
I think that did a lot to help it towards its goal of making you feel all of the feels. But I mean, even something like Papers, Please, which I really want to play, and I haven't had the good fortune to yet. But I mean, you have a game like that where it's kind of like To the Moon in a way, where the actions sometimes feel like fetch quests, but just serve as storytelling mechanisms. I know when I was playing To the Moon, there were points where I, was trying to find the tokens to get to the next part of the level or whatever, the next memory, and it was just okay, I want to find this right now. I don't want to have to go bother finding it because I just care about the story and I don't want that to be interrupted. And I know that was one of the criticisms of the game, is that there was no gameplay. But I don't know, I felt like at times there was too much gameplay, which I think is an interesting thing. And I also felt at times that it kind of brought back the gameplay of old point-and-click adventure games where it was like pixel hunting. You had to find one object in a background where, it wasn't necessarily obvious that, oh, this is the thing I'm supposed to click or, go towards or whatever.
Right, and I think that especially with stuff like To the Moon and other pixel hunting adventures, with the point and click, a lot of the gameplay wasn't necessarily what actions you take. The actual clicking of the item or finding the pixel is, something, but putting all the pieces together, or in the case of To the Moon, figuring out how to get all the shaded blocks unshaded. The mental, figuring it out is what the gameplay is. In a lot of these retro games, because that's what they could do.
Mm-hmm.
They were limited, and they did the best of it what they could. They decided to focus more on the stories.
Well, but then you see trends going in the opposite direction, like Dive Kick, and there's a game I bought on a Humble Bundle probably about a month or two ago, when it was the Puppy Games bundle, Titan Attacks, which for all intents and purposes was just Space Invaders brought into a new era. I'll be perfectly honest, it probably could have been a Flash game, but, it went back to the very retro style, like Galaga, like Space Invaders, where you're just sitting at the bottom of the screen, shooting the things coming down at you from above, and they added upgrades, which is, I don't think something you could do with the original Space Invaders especially. But, it's still, games like that still go back to a very old-timey thing where story wasn't an issue either.
True.
Like I don't think anybody really played Street Fighter for story.
Oh man, well, I mean, I didn't have to play the game. I could have just watched the movie.
And we're gonna move on from that. Thinking of the Mortal Kombat movie, and now I'm
jeez.
depressed. No, I shouldn't
Well,
say that.
In terms of the, I think one of the things that that really goes along with this return to the back to basics gameplay sort of thing, as opposed to, you know, trying to tell a story. And like, there are a lot of, you know, story-based games that I really enjoy. A few Final Fantasies, for instance, The Walking Dead, etc. But I think that this kind of almost complete removal of overt plot from games you could even say it's a reaction against some of the AAA games that have been coming out lately. My thoughts immediately head towards Last of Us, you know, Beyond Two Souls.
Don't even talk about
I
that.
will agree with you on
Don't talk about Beyond Two
on
Souls.
The Last of Us, and I will say that with Beyond Two Souls, like Quantic Dreams, right? I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I like
Yeah.
their game Heavy Rain more. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
I'm not a fan of them.
for instance, I think this as an example works especially well because this is a massive gaming franchise that you know, has been around long enough that the change is really, really apparent. The newest Tomb Raider game, old Tomb Raiders, pretty, like, you know, standard third-person shooters.
And standard boob size.
As standard
the
as
pixelation.
as standard as triple G's can be.
Speaking of pixelation,
But anyway, the newest Tomb Raider, a lot of people have criticized it, and rightfully so, I think. Even though I've been playing through it off and on, and I do enjoy it. It's by no means a bad game. It can be very easily criticized for how linear it is, and how control is taken away from the player at some points. Really good example that others have used before me, but it just really illustrates it. Early in the game, this is right after you get done with the tutorial. You have to cross a log, like, you know, across a ravine. And so,
as one is wont to do.
yes. And so you're going across, and, you know, Lara, you know, the model is, I say model as in the 3D thing on the screen.
Character sprite.
Yes, is obviously losing her balance. Like, that is the animation that is playing. And at a certain point in the bridge, you slip and then get back up.
Oh no, I never
But
saw
there-
that coming.
But then you get back up and you get across. But there is
Oh,
no
God.
point while you are crossing that log that you can get a game over. There is no way to fall off the log. I tried.
Would you say that game over screens are a failure of the game designer, sir?
There are plenty of game over screens in Tomb Raider, and there are other things I could complain
Oh, no,
about,
you
like
know
the
why- you
like
know
the
why I made that joke.
I get the joke. I'm not dignifying it with a response. But there are a lot of game over screens, mostly due to QuickTime events, which is a whole nother, you know, episode of this podcast in general.
Well, but what makes those QuickTime events different from the QuickTime events in, like, say, The Walking Dead or in any platformer, because I mean, when you think about it, platformers, a large part of them becomes essentially quick time events and muscle memory.
I would argue that there's a difference between. I'm kind of with you on The Walking Dead, but that is the difference there. That is the main gameplay mechanic, I'd argue. I completely disagree with you on platformers because it's while you do have to have quick reflexes, it's not
Telling you what button to hit necessarily.
yes, it's like
It's more you intuiting what to do than
yes,
hey buddy, it's time to hit A button now.
exactly. But
All right, I'll
But
concede.
yeah, back to my original point. So yeah, there's a trend in modern gaming of taking control away from the player in order to make something cinematic. Is the word they love to use. Now, let's compare that to a game such as
Shadow of the Colossus.
God of War.
No, I think I'll go with Shadow of the Colossus, actually. Thank you. Nordy J. This is going to be difficult. Joe's going to have to do a lot of bleeping.
We'll have fun with this.
Anyway, so very rarely during Shadow of the Colossus is control taken away from you as a player. The entire fight, like every time you fight a Colossus, you have to, there's no quick time event to kill the Colossus. You climb up to wherever you need to climb up to, and you press square to stab the Colossus.
Now, how is that not a quick time event though? Like you get there, can you just stay up there?
No, you have to. You have to. I mean, you could theoretically stay up there for as long as the grip meter stays. But at no point is it like, okay, you're here. Press square now. You didn't press square, game over. Or you fall off the Colossus, or whatever.
You get run over by a huge boulder.
Exactly. So yeah, it's... And again, Shadow of the Colossus isn't exactly the best example of the kind of retro thing, but...
I wouldn't call that one
No,
retro
not
game.
at all. Not at all.
It's actually old at this point.
Well, not old.
Not old. It's not like
It's still
Mario
within
old,
the it's still within the era of modern moving towards cinematic games, I would say.
Well, it was like the prototype, the prototypical cinematic game in a lot of respects.
I'd agree. But okay, I suppose there's no putting this off any longer. You guys knew I was going to bring this up. Demon Souls and Dark Souls are, I think, the emblems of they are the vanguards of this movement.
That is some strong words you're using there.
All right, Dark Souls sold a lot. Demon Souls was a surprise hit and sold by word of mouth and by fantastic reviews. Dark Souls then was
What
massively
is Demon
hyped.
Souls?
All right,
Is it Demon Souls or Demon's Souls?
demons. They own the souls. Until you kill them and take the souls. But the basic premise, I'm gonna go with Demon Souls first because the basic premise is you are an undead warrior, not technically undead in Demon Souls, but that's not the point. You're a warrior and you're in the Nexus, which is a hub between a bunch of different worlds. And you choose from the Nexus the level you want to go to, and you fight through the level, then you fight a boss. Then you go back to the Nexus, and then you choose your next level. I could have easily swapped out a few words and have described Mega Man.
Huh.
And
Oh, yeah.
it's-
I can see that. Yeah.
I was thinking, what was I thinking? I think I was thinking, I know this sounds weird, but like parts of Crash Bandicoot.
Mm-hmm.
Except it's not. I'm sure that it's
Actually, yeah, no, that like based on what he said, that's actually Crash Bandicoot too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of games do follow this, play the stage, beat the stage,
Come back home.
face a boss,
Mm-hmm.
then go back home. But I mean, yeah, no, that is a good cross.
I feel like one game that like follows that formula that's been released recently. It's an indie game. It's called Bastion. And like you have this like little hub where every time you try to like go through this one world that's like generated on the spot. Like every time you get past that world, you go back to your home and like rebuild it with the resources that you collect. And in all honesty, like that game is one good example of something that follows that format.
Mm-hmm.
As you were saying though before.
Yes. No, I agree with Tito. And just a quick thing for Dark Souls. It's limited open world. You can go through. There's an order you're really meant to go through the stages, but there are no
Restrictions on
there are no restrictions on it, and there are very few loading screens. You go, so you'll start out at the kind of main rest area, Firelink Shrine, and you'll head up to the Undead Burg, go and fight the Taurus demon there, and then go to the Undead Chapel and fight the gargoyles, or you could theoretically go down to the catacombs or whatever. But there's a recommended order, an order that the game kind of pushes you to go to kind of naturally, and you're gradually getting power-ups as you go, and this is very similar, I think. I'll admit this is a bit more of a strain than the Demon Souls Mega Man connection, but this goes back to what we were talking about early in the show with old school Legend of Zelda. If you play Link to the Past, you get out of Hyrule Castle, which is the first level, and you are pretty much free to wander the world.
Yep.
But there's a dungeon close by, and if you go in there and get the power up and fight the boss, it's going to be easier than if you go to the other end of the map.
Right, because that's how you first get the running boots, so that you can run into the bookcase and get the book, and get the gloves, so that you can move rocks.
Exactly.
And actually get into the dungeon.
Yep. So it just makes sense. Like it's not story-based progression. It's gameplay-based progression.
Which is how a game should work.
I agree.
Though a solid story certainly doesn't hurt.
Agreed. Like I've been playing Assassin's Creed 4, which is, I think, the perfect antithesis for this. Seeing as it's an open world game, great big open world with tons of crap to explore. But then, there's this little marker at some place on the map that says main quest, or, main story mission, whatever they call it.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I could go do that. Or I could go around and, find buried treasure and upgrade my ship. And the only thing that I'm going to get out of this story mission, 9 times out of 10, aside from the times that, like, a story mission is required for you to get, like, a big upgrade or something, but 9 times out of 10, the only thing that's happening during a story mission is progressing the plot.
Yes.
So there's no real reason to do them.
Right.
Other than you want to progress you want to say you can that you've beaten the game. And just to make this clear, I'm really enjoying Assassin's Creed 4. It's the first Assassin's Creed game I've put actual time into.
Really?
After being kind of underwhelmed by the first one when it came out.
So wait, did you not play like 2 or any?
No,
of
I
those?
played like maybe 2 hours of the first one, and I was like, not for me.
From a gameplay mechanic, the first, and I know we're getting off track here, but since we're talking about it, from a gameplay mechanic, the first Assassin's Creed game is a little sparse, not kind of like bare bone compared to what eventually became one of the greater in the series, which is Assassin's Creed 2. And then like the Ezio this saga or era of Assassin's Creed was well played, but then when we got to Assassin's Creed 3, it gave us like a not necessarily likable protagonist, and I think they rectified that in Assassin's Creed 4 because I'm enjoying it. So.
But back to retro stuff. We've mostly been talking about, I guess, gameplay mechanics that we
And-
see in retro games.
Yeah, and what exactly they are, but
I think that we should.
I think the point of talking about it is why are they popular? Like, why are we seeing more and more people sort of reject these big name titles, like Call of Duty, like Battlefield, like Assassin's Creed, even a little bit.
Yeah. I know that
and
I'm one of those on the bandwagon with that.
in favor for games like Binding of Isaac, Risk of Rain, Papers, Please, Hotline Miami.
Even some of
those
the
sorts of
lesser
games.
known games like a lot of people really dug IB, which is like and IB and Off, which are both kind of.
Ib.
Oh, is it Ib?
I always pronounce it like it is the word. I don't know what the proper way to say it.
Neither do I. It's either
So, yes.
Ib or IB. I don't know.
We'll correct
The
it
one
in-
with the creepy little girls.
Right, and
we'll
those
correct
are
it in
and
post.
those are Off as an RPG. I don't know what IB is.
Let's just go with adventure game.
Right, but these are games that people are really getting behind. They are playing them, and it means a lot to them. Like, on like various forms of social media, I just see people raving about it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So why do you guys think that these are getting more popular than a lot of games that we would definitely not qualify as retro, but really modern games? Any ideas?
I think it has a lot to do with the satisfaction you get out of these games. Like, you get very little, feeling of accomplishment from, say, beating Skyrim's main quest. Now, a lot of that has to do with that I think Alduin was an awful boss fight, but that's neither here nor there. But it's just not that difficult a game. And you could argue that it's not really about that it's about the feeling of exploration. But let's compare that to Hotline Miami.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing how long I've spent on some levels of Hotline Miami. Sometimes just because I've played the levels over again because they're amazing. Sometimes because I've gotten so damn stuck on them because it's hard.
Yeah.
But my God, once you beat that level, you were like, yes, I am a badass serial killer with a stupid-looking mask.
Right, and something that I think is important is that, do you remember, I guess, any older games where you felt this like feeling of, oh my god, I can't beat this level? What games do you think of?
Mega Man is always up there.
Mega Man, yeah, Mega Man's hard, especially the first level where you can't beat anybody, like because you don't have the right Buster upgrade. What I was thinking of is Super Mario Brothers 3.
I was thinking of some Super Mario Brothers.
Oh my
levels.
gosh! Like there are levels on that you just punch yourself in the face because you can't get them.
Well,
I'm
then-
pretty sure that these like older Nintendo games are the ones that I find so hard that are just so frustrating that I will actually rage quit them. Like I don't look at myself as much of a person who rages over anything, but these games just drive you to get so angry about them. And I think what Brian's saying is just, emulating this Nintendo hard or Nintendo difficulty of games that people are really looking for. They don't want to beat a game easily. Nobody wants anything given to them per se, especially if they're playing a game. They're playing a game to be challenged sometimes.
Well, and I think that sometimes it's a little bit of instant gratification, where you have these games that are in very easy to delineate stages. I mean, they're numbered more often than not. And I think two that really fit the mold that you're talking about with the sort of Mario-style platformer are one that I've played and one that I haven't. I've played Electric Super Joy, which is what I like to call rage quit the game, because you can die 70 times in a level easily on the same obstacle, which is infuriating. And it does come down to the muscle memory that we were talking about earlier. And then the other game I was thinking of was Cloudberry Kingdom, which is not terribly well known as far as I'm aware. But it's a platforming game. I think they said it was designed by an AI that is built to build levels like this. And it just automatically generates them, which I think is a really cool idea in and of itself.
Yeah.
But it has that very platformer feel. Well, it is a platformer, excuse me. But, and it has these really difficult levels that are really about timing the jumps appropriately. And it even has elements of bullet hells that, I've seen in gameplay that just look terrible. And it still has that very new age cop-out style where, if you collect enough of the gems, you can buy a little help to get you through the level, slowing the motions down, or even a walkthrough after a certain point.
Well, while Nordy J was talking, I believe we all had the same reaction when Joe held up his phone with Flappy Bird open.
Dude.
And I can't believe we didn't think of it earlier.
See, I haven't heard. I just heard about Flappy Bird 2 days ago in a post about the Super Bowl, and I didn't understand it at all because I'd never seen the game. It was the Seahawks are these pipes, and the Broncos are trying to get through them. Presumably, I don't know how you play Flappy Bird.
Well, Flappy Bird basically it's actually funny because you are this bird and you basically tap on the screen in order to get this bird to progress through the pipes.
You ever play that helicopter flash game where if
Oh,
you click
God.
it goes up, you let go it goes down?
It's basically
Really?
that with tapping.
We've rehashed that again
We have rehashed that, but
for the millionth time.
it's a very much a retro game because
It's the same bloody thing.
it's the same bloody
In a-
thing.
in a
But the other
different
thing
mask.
is Mario pipes are in the game.
Yes.
What you go through are the Mario pipes.
Almost ripped from
I'm-
and that's
from
what-
the
that's-
NES cartridge.
And that's why
I'm
I was,
surprised
that's
they
why I
haven't
was
been
really
sued.
confused because I'm this. They're not acknowledging that this is Mario, but those pipes are very clearly from Mario, and that's why I didn't understand until a couple days ago that no, that's actually a different game that was just released.
Mm-hmm.
But Flappy Bird has that infuriation of not being able to beat the Mega Man or the Super Mario level to it.
There's always someone who will one-up you in that game, and it infuriates me.
Yeah.
That too.
It's infuriating.
I have seen so many posts and I've talked to so many people who are ripping their hair out over this game. And I think that's almost, hyperbolic to what everybody felt like back in the day, because we are so used to this instant gratification of video games. We're playing these video games that we just, we've just grown into this.
Thing where they give us what we're
Exactly.
what we need. It's easy to get.
Right.
I feel like we've been like catered as like a consumer because if you think about it, that's another reason why like you guys were talking about like that appreciation factor of completing a difficult game. Well, I'll use an example. It's not a retro game. It's a game that a retro style game. It's a game that just recently came out. It's for the 3DS and PS Vita or Vita.
Vita.
Well, it's called Bravely Default.
Oh, yeah, I
And
have
in that, and then in that RPG, you're able to turn off the slider how much you want of random encounters, and so forth. I mean, it's a cool concept, but it takes away the inherent danger, I guess. If you want, like, say you're like low life, and you're in a dungeon, you're like normally you're shit out of luck in those situations. I remember going through so many JRPGs in that sense, and like, fuck, I'm screwed. But no, you can like literally turn it down to 0 and you just like walk out of the dungeon as if nothing. So like I feel like it's a revolution. It's like a movement to counteract that kind of stuff. This like whole like idea that like we're gonna get Dark Souls, Demon Souls, that just like games that give you that gratification, like that ability to like say, oh, I beat Dark Souls. What did you do with your day? I don't know. Like it's just
Well, and that brings a very good point of in the times before the internet, if you beat a really difficult game that, was relatively well known, you got respect.
You wore that like a badge of honor.
You were a legend.
You were the legend of your hometown coming out, to the rest of the world, hey, I beat this game. Especially when you take into account the fact that they didn't really have saving for a long time. You couldn't, you die so many times in the original Mario.
Yeah.
You don't go back to the beginning of the level. You go back to the beginning of the game.
Mhm.
Really
which is
quick-
why I'm so familiar with it, of course.
Really quick fun fact, I believe the first Legend of Zelda had an extra like battery pack
Yeah.
in it. So
Yeah,
that you could have
it was
save
like
games.
it was like the first game to like implement that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Mhm.
Just the little stuff like that. I mean, but it's interesting that I bring that up. I wasn't even thinking about this before. But to what extent is that similar to Tito's argument that Bravely Default shouldn't have these, random encounter sliders? How much are you giving the consumer by even just letting them save the game? We take saving the game as this, given. Like, oh my god, I need to save the game. I can't beat this in one sitting. Well, back in the day, you were supposed to beat it in one sitting.
Well, and
That's a very good point that you bring up. Oh, sorry.
Oh, thank you.
No. And that's an interesting point that we see, again, in some newer games where permadeath is a thing.
Mhm.
And in particular, I'm thinking of Risk of Rain, which is another platformer. But, you die in that, and you're done. You have to start over from square one. And I even know some Minecraft servers have the same setup where you die once. It will not only kill your character, the world itself will be wiped, which is a much more extreme version of that no saves allowed.
Another like the thing that you're talking about, like what Joe said and what we've been discussing recently, is that like we've been catered, like especially with the saves and all that stuff. So, for instance, like, and I was talking about Bravely Default earlier, and I'm just going along with this idea that the new Fire Emblem game, Fire Emblem, right? Like it's that like your character dies, you either have to restart the mission or you're gonna go out with that character. You're gonna be like, sayonara, he's gone. The new Fire Emblem game, you have that option of turning that like permadeath off. You're like, oh, it's just a flesh wound, pretty much. Like, I mean, it's not a forced thing. Obviously, just like the Bravely Default thing, it's not a forced thing. But giving that option, but then again, you always look at the fact that what Joe said earlier was the fact that like we're also we have it as a given that like save states are a thing. So like, what if in the future, like these like sliders or like these options to make games easier just become like a given? Like, I don't know.
So do you guys think that the main reason these retro games are coming back into style is for reasons like that, where it's sort of the sense of accomplishment and the feeling that I've really earned this because it's not given to you anymore?
Yeah, I'm I'm gonna be the asshole here for just 1 second.
How dare you?
Only 1 second?
Shut up, Nordy J. I'm gonna argue that I think 2 big points that I do think that, you know, the gratification aspect, the satisfaction aspect is, I think, the biggest factor. But I think 2 things we can't ignore are, one, it is a lot easier for indie developers to use this kind of retro art style, but that doesn't really so much address the gameplay aspect. And the second one is that there are a lot of people within the gaming community who I hesitate to call them hipsters, but they want to play games that are not mainstream, and retro is something that appeals to them because, you know, it's not current, at least on a surface level. It's something that is not the current mainstream. Now, I don't want to be saying that those are the main reasons retro is coming back, but I think we have to mention them at least.
So you think it's partially driven by hardcore gamers? I don't think I'd call them even hipsters because
I think there's
it's just
an overlap between those 2 demographics.
okay. I've
But they're
always-
not one and the same.
Yeah,
Old
I've
hipsters.
I've always looked at it more as sort of more nerdy people reclaiming, you know, what was theirs for a very long time. Where, you know, it used to be if you played video games in your home, that wasn't something everybody did. Whereas now, it almost everybody I know has at least an Xbox or a PS3 or a 4 now, or an Xbox One now that we're rolling over.
Or hell, an iPhone. I mean, you know.
Or even an iPhone. Yeah, it's come to the point where gaming has become so part of our culture that we now do it while we're, you know, at a bus stop, which is something you never could do in days past.
Good think about it.
Yeah, you would think about it. You would dream longingly.
Heck, you can even play in some parts of Europe. You can play, I think it's Pong or something, against
on the crosswalks.
Yeah, on the crosswalks while you're waiting for the light to change, you can play Pong against the person across from you.
That's amazing.
Or it's like soccer or something.
It's basically Pong.
It's
yeah,
basically
I saw
Pong.
that.
It's
Alright.
super cool. So like just that is how ingrained these video games are into modern society. But the other thing is, that's also a very retro game. It's a game that everyone understands and gets.
Simplicity is also a big draw, I think, for
Yeah.
a lot of these.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
like dive kick has 2 buttons. You do nothing but dive and kick.
man, gaming.
Profound, I know. But I think with that we're gonna wrap it up for the night. So just signing off for late night gaming thought.
With
Yep.
the Midnight Crew.
I'm Nordy J.
I'm Brian.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Tito. As the ancient wines used to say, 2 a.m. is too late to start podcasts.
I don't remember them saying that.
Good night,
Yeah,
folks.
Night, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Late Night Gaming Thought with the Midnight Crew. Like, comment, subscribe, and suggest topics on our Facebook. Thank you.